So I think that I was asked to come here to provide a little bit of perspective on the more rural western half of the county, with which many people are less familiar. Just to get a sense before I start, who here has ever heard of the Resource Conservation District? Heard of it? How many feel like they actually know what it is? Okay, one. I want to go from two. Okay, that gives me a good sense of things. So let's see. How do I guess I advance it this way. So for many people haven't heard of resource conservation districts. There's about 100 of us across the state of California, established in the state's Public Resources Code. And we're pretty much the best kept secret, I think, in a lot of locations. Wait, I'm not doing this right. Do I not do page down?
Page right.
Page right.
There's a clicker too.
There we go. Thanks. So those show essentially our boundaries. We serve the western half of the county. We've been around for 75 years, and we were formed coming out of the Dust Bowl crisis, when the nation realized that the combination of drought and topsoil loss, that our soil was an issue of national security. They created what was then called the Soil Conservation Service, and local districts were established around the nation to be host to that federal agency and to provide local priorities. So we exist in partnership with what is now called the Natural Conservation Service and a Natural Resources Conservation Service, and we're based in Half Moon Bay with this USDA department. We just celebrated our 75th anniversary, and you'll see on that map that we have a couple of cities within our boundaries, but we also deal a lot with the rural unincorporated areas of the county. So what we do is we provide technical assistance. We actually implement projects. We do a lot of conservation planning, a great deal of education and outreach, but most notably is that we accomplish literally everything through partnership. We work where we are invited as a non-regulatory entity to do voluntary conservation work. We work with cities, the county, we work with private landowners, farmers, regulators, etc. And we bring incentives and assistance, technical assistance for people to make environmental improvements, a wide range of environmental improvements. Our work is non-regulatory, and so we are among the few public agencies that is often invited onto private lands where sometimes we see some of the biggest environmental issues to address. The fact that we do non-regulatory work and we can be discreet and provide confidential assistance is essential to how we get our work done. So with the confidence of those landowners, there's also the fact that we are rooted in agriculture. We were formed by farmers about 75 years ago, and a great deal of the agriculture in the county is in the area that we serve. Although it's also true that we now work in residential subdivisions and urban areas and on public conservation lands, etc., because our land use has changed so much over time. But today I've been asked to really focus on our work with agriculture, and we make environmental improvements that work within the agricultural business model. And today I'm going to focus a little bit on the work that we're doing with water stewardship particularly. So we provide technical assistance directly to these farmers, ranchers, and landowners, and very site-specific planning based on their resource needs in a diverse range of program areas, often resulting in integrated comprehensive resource management that has climate benefits, carbon sequestration, water conservation, water quality improvements, habitat improvements, etc. A little bit about drought on the coast, what's happening. Water availability, as I think everybody in this room knows, is one of the most significant forces shaping the future of California, both in terms of environment, agriculture, and economics. And this isn't just happening in Tulare Lake or in the Central Valley where you see pictures of things drying up. Right now, at this very moment on the coast, there are people whose wells are dry, who are trucking in water. There are creeks that are home to endangered salmon where the salmon are languishing in little puddles and drying up. Or this family on the coast that bathes their children once a week, and they literally put the dirtiest kid in last. And there are farm fields that are going fallow. It's actually really happening right now. And one of the differences that I see often between the areas where there are utilities on this part of the coast, there are no water utilities. There's maybe small water companies with 7 landowners, owning it, or a homeowners association. But But there isn't quite the disassociation or the need for some of the outreach about water conservation, because these are people who are paying exorbitant rates to truck water in from someplace else and are terrified of their wells running dry. So people are largely aware. There's of course no snowpack on the coast, and if that, and not much known about the groundwater supplies and the surface water supplies. You can see them, they're running out, and even in these shoes I can hop across some of the creeks that are the water supply for some of these communities. So what we see is that we've gone full circle from being formed out of the Dust Bowl to working in extreme drought conditions again. So a lot of our work has to do with balancing competing demands on very limited and changing resources. For example, the Pillarcitos watershed, which runs through the city of Half Moon Bay. In one watershed, and here's a creek that I can jump across. This creek is home to numerous threatened and endangered species. The city of Half Moon Bay, a quarry, a cemetery, a landfill, state parks, and protected open space land, etc., and a couple of different utilities. SFPUC owns the top part of this watershed, Coastside County Water District, manages the lower part of the watershed, Sewer Authority Mid-Coastside. All of this are competing demands on this one creek. And so it becomes very important to balance some of those demands on these resources. And a lot of our work, particularly in change of, and as we're observing changes in seasonality of water and species and that sort of thing. So a lot of our work has to do with bringing together various entities to come to consensus in developing watershed plans or strategies across jurisdictions, across boundaries, across properties, across land use types to manage these resources. Also, a lot of our work right now is focusing on habitat restoration in streams and that sort of thing, so that when we have very limited water, there's places for aquatic organisms to go so that they have refuge. Now, that said, the thing that I was going to focus on now has to do with the actual water conservation efforts. Our gateway to getting people to undertake a lot of water conservation, particularly in agriculture, is water audits, water and energy audits. So we'll go out on farms and take a look at their distribution uniformity and et cetera. And their big cost for water, remember they're not paying municipal rates because they're drawing from groundwater in the creek. Their big cost is pumping. So the extent to which we can reduce pumping costs reduces their costs in light of international competition, et cetera, for their crops. So we'll start with an audit that identifies all the different ways that they can save money and reduce their consumption of water and energy. And then from that, provide them with a number of things that they can do to make improvements. This is an example of a project that we completed. This was the largest nursery on the coast, a very important part of the economy there. And actually they were purchasing municipal water from Coastside County Water District. So we worked with them on a large-scale project to capture the rainwater off of all those roofs and reuse it. To capture the stormwater, see all that impervious surface on the ground, to capture the stormwater. They were also paying for the stormwater that was coming off of their property. They were paying for the water coming on and the water going off. And also worked with them to recycle their irrigation water and be able to reuse it on their crops. As a result, they won the Silicon Valley Water Conservation Awards, and they have saved just millions of gallons of water from that they were previously taking that was new. This is another example of some of the work that we do, and I wanted to point this out because as you're driving down the coast, people might not realize when you're looking at a farm field, the amount of infrastructure that's underground. 8 inches underground is probably a network of pipes like you couldn't possibly imagine. So a lot of our work has to do with those sorts of water conservation, improving pipes, pumps, sprinklers, et cetera, for large-scale water conservation. Very similar techniques are that which we would do with golf courses and cemeteries. They're basically their crop is grass. And then drought and climate change both bring the need for resilience for agriculture with and also for aquatic species and also domestic water supply. One of the things that can actually balance a lot of those competing demands are ponds. These farm ponds that you see on the coast are very intentional features that were constructed by someone. They're not natural. By putting in those farm ponds, we're able to, I wanted to put that in because I thought probably most people haven't seen what it looks like when someone diverts from a creek. That's it, the pipe that goes into the creek and that hose. By giving farmers water storage off of a creek, it enables them to store water during winter rains and then irrigate from those ponds in late summer and early fall rather than from the creek. Late summer and early fall is when the salmon most need it and when water is most limited, and also when it's most needed for irrigation. Simply by giving them storage during a different time of the year, it can really help to minimize their impact on aquatic resources. And I put in a couple of pictures of different ponds to show you because I think that they look really different and they have different benefits. Ponds can capture peak storm flows and reduce flooding. Ponds can recharge groundwater, not when they have a plastic liner, but they can recharge groundwater and improve base flow of creeks. Ponds can, in far reaches of ranches, can enable cattle to go further back in ranches so that you can do conservation, rotational grazing of cattle and build soil health and native plants and sequester carbon and mitigate significant amounts of climate impacts. There's incredible benefits from these relatively simple looking features on a landscape, including the habitat themselves for a number of these ponds. So the ponds can really benefit not only the local farms and local food security, local economy, but also the water conservation and aquatic resources efforts that we've got going on. Our ponds program is an initiative to construct or repair 100 ponds on the coast for the diverse and integrated benefits having to do with water conservation, habitat, etc. So I wanted to point out that some of these features are actually not ponds. Sometimes we do other things like tanks that are pumping groundwater using solar or wind. And that as simple as it looks, this overwhelming slide is to show you the number of local, state, and federal permits that are required to put in a pond. So it can take us 2.5 years to get the permits for a pond that takes 2 weeks to construct, and it can take a couple $100,000. These are really essential landscape features for resilience and drought relief on the coast. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is that this is how you get comprehensive solutions for voluntary conservation. Not only do you do these projects, but you also provide assistance with permits, funding, and cost share, and some of the education and outreach, and that's what we do. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that while we're talking about water conservation, if the water quality isn't good, the water isn't functionally there. So while it's true that there may be water, we can't use it for these domestic or residential or recreational or habitat purposes if the water itself is dangerous or destructive. So many of our efforts in our water program are focused on monitoring and improving water quality so that the water supply is functionally available. And I'll also put in a plug that if anybody wants to volunteer for that program, to talk to me before you leave today. We'd love to have more water quality monitors. Thank you.